Thank you, everybody. My name is Aaron Stark, and I was almost a school shooter. In 1997, I was a student at North High School down in by 38th and 32nd and Sheridan, or 32nd and Federal, sorry. During that time there, I had planned out an attack on the school. I was going to go in through the hallway next to the lunchroom and kill as many students as I possibly could, and hopefully die by police afterwards. I grew up in a really chaotic environment. My family was a bunch of druggies and alcoholics. We moved around from place to place a lot. They were addicted to crack cocaine and would steal everything around them. Like on Christmases, I would end up with every toy that I ever wanted because they would steal the entire toy delivery truck and then sell it at the flea market. So I might end up with all the He-Man toys, but everything was stolen. And nothing had any permanency to it because every couple of weeks I get woken up at like 3 o'clock in the morning with someone throwing a bag at me saying, grab all your shit, we need to get out of here right now because the cops are coming. And then we'd run across the country and end up in another state. I wake up there and have to start my life all over again. I went to like 40 different schools growing up. So one thing I learned about definitely was how to be the new kid. I was a new kid every single place I went to. And everywhere I went there was a whole new set of bullies, a whole new set of people I had to adapt to. And I was the fat, smelly kid. I didn't have a shower because we moved around so much and never had any stable place to sleep and had to take a shower. My clothes were always filthy. I did things that people just picked on me for. I loved comic books. It was back in the 80s and 90s when comic books were not only not cool, but they actively damaged your coolness to like them. So I was a poet, and I was a reader, and I wrote things. And that was just, not only was it discouraged, but it was actively attacked by everybody that was around. They were a bunch of gearheads. They were a bunch of football players and jocks. And for them to look at me as the sensitive one, I just got completely destroyed. Every day I get told I was a worthless piece of shit as much as possible. So I started adapting darkness as my shield. I learned early on that there was a nice comfort in darkness. That when the rest of your life is chaos and everything around you is swirling around like this giant tornado you have no control over, you can find a little bit of control sometimes in pain. It's really weird the way that is. I started cutting myself. I still have scars on my arm to this day where I spent hours in my room with a razor blade cutting myself because it was the only thing in my life I had any control over. Everything in my life was just complete chaos. I had no control over where I was living. I had no control over what the stuff that I had because any minute everything could get thrown away or destroyed. I had no control over my own sense of self because at any minute I could be in the middle of a gigantic drunken fight and be literally beating someone up or fighting for my life. So the only thing I could ever have any control over was that. Gave me a little bit of normalcy. It's weird how sometimes the most negative things can become normal to you when you do it long enough, when you live in that darkness. As I grew up, I got to be like 13, 14 years old. I couldn't live at my house anymore. I started basically making myself homeless because I just couldn't exist with the drunken crack fights anymore. And I started basically living at the school of wherever I was at because that was the only safe spot. So I would go hang out in like various teachers' classrooms. I had one teacher at North High that was my economic teacher. He was the one safe spot. My lunchtime, I could go to his class and hang out instead of go to the lunch area, because if I went to the lunch area, I was gonna get food thrown on me because I was fat, or someone was gonna just making fun of me because I was eating too much, or act like they're gonna harpoon me like I was a whale. I couldn't take that anymore, so I had to find some place to section out. But the abuse at school paled in comparison to what was happening at home. I was told I was worthless every day of my life. I was told I was just a worthless piece of shit who wouldn't amount to anything. Now, my brother was a mechanic. He worked on cars and wrecked enough cars to where I wasn't able to get my license at all, but when I started to get one. But he was encouraged. Everything that he did was encouraged. Everything I did was not. It was just, I was the worthless piece of shit. I was the one at the bottom. And so, you're told you're worthless enough, you're going to believe it. Then you're going to do everything you can to make everybody else around you believe it too. And so I did. You think I'm the worthless piece of shit? Then I'm going to do that. I'm going to be I'm going to be so inappropriate and so aggressively disgusting. I'm gonna keep everybody away from me. I started living in filth. My room was just literally lined wall-to-wall filth. I knew where to step to not smash and break anything, but then no one else could. I refused to start taking showers, even when I had the ability to. I'd say the most offensive things to the people who it would hurt the most, just so I could get some kind of reaction. Because if I'm gonna be the bad guy, then I'm gonna make myself the bad guy. And it just kept on spiraling more and more. When you live in that darkness and you live in that pain and you start making that your reality, you start wearing that like a vest and like a shield, it starts spinning out and you start going down that spiral. And there was an album at the time called The Downward Spiral by 9 Inch Nails. That album was basically my autobiography. If you go track by track in that album, that was my life. I was living in a downward spiral. Finally came to the point where I was like 15, 16 years old. I was staying in my friend's shed. The whole time I had one friend. He was the one calm spot in my storm, where everything else in my world was this giant tornado. He was the one spot that I could go and be normal. He never moved. His family always lived in the same house. So wherever I moved across the country, I always knew that I had his family phone number memorized, so I could always call him. He was like the home base. And at this time, he was the only thing I had left. I was living in his tool shed because his parents wouldn't let me stay in the house. So he was sneaking me out food. And I was sleeping in a dingy gray recliner chair in this nasty old tool shed. The roof had like holes in it and the slats between the roofs, so rain's all falling down. Cobwebs and dirt everywhere. I have, my arm is just completely covered in blood. I'm dripping blood on the ground. And I'm thinking, I need to do something or I'm going to die. I just couldn't think of what to do. But my whole life, some people had reached out. Social services had tried to intervene 7 or 8 times in my life, but my parents had always managed to escape and run away or tell them, make up a story and make them not believe anything was wrong or get out of it somehow. So I knew that social services had tried. So I got up in the morning and I went and knocked on my friend's back door and I talked to his mom and I got the phone number for social services and I called them and set up a meeting. And I got on the bus and I went there, and when I got there, they didn't just call me in, they also called my mom in there too. And that was one of the most terrible things that ever happened to me. Because even though I produced a bloody razor blade and threw that on the table, and even though I showed them my arm and told them what was happening, even I told them about the field that I was sleeping in most nights, I was living in my best friend's shed, they didn't believe me. She got them to believe that I was just making it all up. It was just for attention. I didn't mean any of it. They sent me home with her. And as I went home with her, she turned to me and she snarled and said, "Next time you should do a better job and I'll buy you the razor blades." It just broke me. It was the worst sentence anyone's ever said to me. I thought I was wearing that darkness before. I fully jumped into it now. I am going to be the bad guy. I just destroyed everything I possibly could in my life. Anything that I thought was good, I destroyed it because I felt I didn't deserve it. I was the worst piece of shit. I didn't deserve any of this. So even the pain that I was giving myself, I didn't even deserve to control that. I just destroyed everything. So I went on a tear for the next 4 or 5 months and just destroyed everything in my life. Even Mike, even ended up pushing him away, the one last friend that I thought I had. I finally end up sleeping in a field behind Casa Bonita. It's like, I decided that I need to do something. I told them I was coming last time, and they called my mom in because I warned them. So I know I'm not going to warn them this time. I just got to show up and just ask for some help. So I right across the street from North High School at the time, there was a sign on a building that said mental health. I had no idea what the building was for. I just knew the sign said mental health. So I go up and I go there and I say, "I need some help." Luckily, it was a counseling office. But for some reason, I think looking back that it was because she was not trained and young. Even though, again, I produced a bloody razor blade. Even though, again, I showed them what damage I was doing to myself. And by this time, it wasn't just an arm. I was covered in filth and blood. I hadn't changed my socks in like a month. My feet were rotting off of my ankles. They were so bad. She still told me, "I'm sorry, there's nothing I can do for you. There's no help I can give you. I can't help you today." And I walked out of that building. And as I walked out of that building into the dark, that dark just walked right into me. And I found something really strange. That whole tornado of chaos I was living in, that hurricane of pain and anger that I was living in for years, at the bottom of it, there's nothing. It gets really calm and quiet. It's really still. Because when you really don't have anything left to live for, and you really don't have anything left to lose, you don't have any emotion to care about. And that was the spot that I hit. I hit that dark, calm spot. I knew that right across the street, right next to North High, there were gangbangers that hung out next to the ROTC room down there. They had seen me living in Viking Park across the street from there. They knew I wasn't any kind of narc. They could obviously tell I wasn't involved with any kind of authorities. And I knew they had brought guns to school. Remember, this was mid-90s, so this was like Boys in the Hood era. So they had brought guns to school and flashed them around everywhere. And I knew they had access to it. And they had sold drugs to my family, so they knew me on a first-name basis, but nothing more than that. But I didn't need more than that. I walked up to them, I'm like, hey, can you get me a gun, preferably one that shoots a lot of bullets? Like, yeah, sure. Give me an ounce of weed. Give me a couple days, I'll get it for you. Ounce of weed was no problem. I went to my mom's house and stole an ounce from the druggie sleeping on her floor. That was no issue at all. Went and brought it to him the next day. I said, all right, here you go. He's like, all right, dude, give me 3 days. Okay, fine. So I was planning on killing a lot of people. I had planned to attack 2 different places. I had planned to either attack the school or a mall food court, Lakeside Mall, down on 44th. And not at all to attack the people. It wasn't directed at the students or the people in the place. It was to destroy myself and to punish my family by making a monster. I wanted them to pay by making who I was. I was so disgusted in myself that I wanted to show them who I was and pay for it. That during that dark time, looking back, I was kind of in that place where I was saying goodbye to people. So I went to Mike's house, and I was basically kind of just explaining how I felt about our relationship and how much I appreciated everything he had ever done for me and all that. And Mike, while he didn't understand, and he didn't know what I was planning at all, he knew that I was in a really dark place. And he had inklings of it, because one weird thing about being in that dark as your life and as your normal is you start to use that as your fiction too. So when I was hanging out with friends, instead of sitting there fantasizing about, well, what would be the new video game, or what's the new thing on the movies, or what's the new thing in gossip, we would sit there and talk about, well, if I were going to kill a lot of people, this is how I'd do it. Well, if you were going to attack a bunch of people and kill many people, how would you do it without getting caught in the quickest amount of time? And so for years, that had been my fiction. So he saw that something had switched in me, that had taken that from being just a fiction that we would laugh about to something more real, something much more concrete. And Mike did the most amazing thing. He just treated me like a person. Everybody else in my life treated me like a project. They either despised me and wanted to push me away because I was disgusting, or they were like, oh, you're broken. Oh, here we can fix you. Here's this thing we can do to get you involved that we can put you into. Here's a program we can get to fix you. Here's how you're wrong. Here's the 7 ways that we can get to make you better. And every one of those was just completely defeating the purpose. It made me feel even less of a person. I'm not your freaking project. Mike didn't treat me like that. He just sat me down and he's like, dude, it's okay. I understand. The hell you're going through. The way you're acting, it's okay. That pain you're feeling, it's all right to feel that way. You're not broken. When someone treats you like a person when you don't even feel like you're human, it'll change your entire world. And it changed mine. I never went back to get that gun that day. I stayed at Mike's house for a week, actually, and hung out with him for a while. It made me better, but the thing about it is, it's not like a switch you can just flip off. It's not like that hell that I was living in was all of a sudden made better because I had one nice night with my best friend. I was still living in that shit. I was still living in that hell. A couple months went by. Actually, about 1.5 years went by. It was coming up on my 19th birthday. And the hell of my family's never stopped. Between the drunken beatings and violence, and it just never stopped. So I was, again, sleeping in the field behind Casa Bonita, because when you bounce around between state to state, you start to get little places where you're more comfortable. And that was my one place I knew I could sleep if I didn't have anywhere else. So I was sleeping in the field at Casa Bonita, and I was planning on killing myself on my 19th birthday. I had stolen a bunch of cocaine and prescription drugs from my mom, and I had gotten hold of about 20 hits of LSD. I was planning on taking all of that and dying. at the end of the night on my 19th birthday. And during the day, I was doing my best to act like nothing was wrong, because someone had tried to intervene last time when I was depressed, and I knew that they were looking for signs now. So I did my best to act like there was no problem, to go along my day like everything was completely normal. So I went and was hanging out with Mike, who was again still my one safe spot that would still be willing to hang out and spend some time with me. So Mike himself, he was a social guy. He had a social circle of his own, so he had a bunch of friends. And when they would come around, I was like the litmus test. They had to put up with me to be there, so if they couldn't put up with me, they weren't allowed to hang out. But he had a group of friends of his own, and one of them was this girl, Amber. Amber was really cool. We'd go over to her house occasionally and like sit down, watch a movie, shoot the shit, whatever. And so he was like, okay, we're gonna go kick it at Amber's house. Okay, fine. I don't think anything of it. I think it's just a regular day. Then I was planning on going home and killing myself at the end of the day, so I'm like, oh, do whatever I need to do. So we go there, and instead of it just being a get-together, it was a surprise birthday party for me. And instead of having to go home and kill myself, I sat there and they had a blueberry peach pie and like 15 people all there having a nice party for me. So I spent the weekend actually being with people who loved me instead of being by myself in that dark. And that's the last time I ever tried to kill myself. If you see someone who's in that pain and is pushed to that edge, give them that love that they need. Don't look at them like they might be the outcast just because they're different than you. Just because they might be angry or depressed, or just because they might not like the things you like, just because they might be dirty or filthy. Don't push them away. Make that kid your friend. Give love to the people you think deserve it the least, because they need it the most. It'll help you as much as it helps them. I spend my life now going from place to place, trying to help as many people as I possibly can with this. So I appreciate you guys sitting here listening to me today. If I can leave you with one thing, it's just, please, give love to those who you feel deserve it the least, because they need it the most. Thank you. I would like to open up to question and answers, and please, like you said before, there is nothing off limits. No question is too personal. Make this as raw and open as possible. Anything you want. Raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Mr. Dennis is going to come around with a microphone.
So with everything that you lived through, like, you obviously had a hard life, right?
I can't hear you.
So like, with everything that you lived through, like, you obviously have a hard life, right? And now, like, you said growing up, like, you felt like shit, like you thought you were worthless. So how do you see yourself today? Like, what do you see yourself as?
So what he asked was, I used to see myself as a worthless piece of shit, and how do I see myself today? And I'm freaking proud of myself today. Like, my prize achievement in my life is that my 18-year-old daughter tells everybody I'm her best friend. When I was 18, I hated my family. I wouldn't be around them. But I make it a point to where, sorry, it breaks me up when I think about them, but with my kids, I always me and my wife, we have a policy that we want to be the house that our family never says, oh my God, my parents are going to kill me if they find out. And be, oh my God, this happened, I need to tell my parents. So that's what I'm just proud of. And this whole thing I'm doing, I'm really proud of what's happening with it, because there's a really weird effect that's been happening, where the barriers that we put up to separate ourselves, they don't even exist for me right now. Like, so let me give you a quick backstory as to what's my journey with all this, why I'm even here today. So a year ago, right after Parkland, it was literally the day after Parkland, I'm sitting with my wife and my daughter, and we're watching the news, and we're seeing the terrible shit that's happening, and they're crying and asking, so how could someone ever get to this point? How could you ever feel like you wanted to kill a lot of people? And I sadly understand how you get to that point. So I literally went to the bathroom and sat on the toilet, wrote a Facebook post. And in that I wrote that I was almost a school shooter, and that we need to give people love, and that If I would have had love, if I would have had a rifle, I would have been a killer, but if I would have had love, I would have never wanted a rifle. And so I wrote that just for my family, and that got like Facebook viral, like that got like 100,000 views and likes and shares. And so my wife was like, you should send this to Channel 9 News, they might like it. So I sent it to Kyle Clark, and that blew up. They did a story on me that got like 17 million views. And so since then, I've done a Washington Post article, I did the TED Talk, and now I do these speeches. But the cool thing is the response from that has been, I'm up to over 50,000 personal messages in my inbox, but it's not just, hey, that's cool, I like your story. It's, hey, that's cool, and here's all of my pain. Here's everything that ever happened to me. And so I have, my inbox is full of thousands upon thousands of diaries from people all over the world. And the one thing that showed me is it breaks through all of the divisions that we have in society right now. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican, if you're a Trump supporter, Trump opponent, if you're a gun advocate, gun opponent, if you're atheist or Christian, none of that stuff matters. Even your social status, that doesn't matter when it comes to the bottom line of it is love and compassion is what we need because we all feel this sense of pain and isolation and loneliness. I really feel that this sense of worthlessness is near universal and that there's not much difference from the pain that I was feeling as a depressed kid and the pain of, say, a model who's bulimic, who before her beauty pageant, she goes and throws up in her car to make herself beautiful. There's, at the heart of it, that sense of worthlessness is the same. And I think that it's a sad fact that that might be what's connecting us, but if that can be the one thing we can start to look beyond the superficial barriers that we put up between ourselves and start to look at each other as actual people and start to give love to the ones we feel deserve it the least in all of our areas. The people you disagree with, show them the love too. And maybe we can start to heal this split that we have in the world right now. So. Got a question down here?
How's the relationship with your parents now?
Well, the day before, or the day I got approved for my TED Talk, I also got a screaming call from my mom that I was indeed a worthless piece of shit and should be dead. So my mom, my brother, my grandma have all disowned me. I had to block them all on Facebook. My stepdad's dead now. So yeah, most of my extended family I had to sever ties. However, the younger generation of that family are all on my side because they all saw the same thing too. So my tactic, my response to it is, if you're upset about me talking about the truth of what happened to me 25 years ago, but you're not paying attention to who I am now, then it's not my fault.
All right, so after all the mass shootings, who would be to blame, the gun or the person behind the gun?
Both.
How so?
And I think focusing on one is a detriment to the other. I think that, I'll explain it to you this way. So in these conversations I have, there are two things that I try to avoid saying, and that is either mental health or gun control. And here's why. I avoid saying gun control because you get lost in the minutia of the details. People are like, well, that's not an assault rifle, and this gun doesn't fit this specification, and what about this ammo? And you get lost in all the tiny little details of it, and you completely lose sight of what the actual argument's about. And on the flip side, you have mental health. And that's the exact problem, but in the whole opposite spectrum. So you mentioned mental health, and that's this big gray amorphous blob that no one can ever wrap their hands around, no one ever really understands what it means, no one can ever nail down any details of what it is, there's no specific solutions to it, so it's this big thing no one ever can really understand. So if you say either mental health or gun control, the argument gets shut off, and it turns into this gray noise, okay? So the concept that people have of, is it the gun or is it the person, It has to be both. We have to look at this like it's a nuanced subject with a lot of different small solutions that might add up to a big one, because the one thing there isn't is any fix-all solution. There is nothing that's going to fix the big problem. The solution that I'm asking you guys to do of give kindness to the people who don't deserve it and show love to the people who might be the outcast, that is not going to solve all the problems of school shootings. It might not solve many of them, but if it solves one, it's worth it. Then we have to start looking at our solutions that way. If we put an absolute on the standards for our solutions, we're never going to achieve that standard. And we need to start working small. The only constant in life is change. And here's something, this ties into something that I was discussing with Mr. Dennis before the show. I used to, in my recovery, I did kind of a personal cognitive behavioral therapy on myself, where I would get up every morning and I would tell myself a mantra, and I would look through, I would get up in the morning when I was in the middle of that depression, I'd look in the mirror and I'd tell myself, today you're gonna walk through a river of shit, and it's gonna suck, and it's gonna hurt. And at the end of the day, you're gonna be covered in shit, but you're still gonna be walking. And that was the mantra I used every day to keep myself going then. I have taken that same philosophy and adapted it now, because I am not walking through a river of shit anymore. Now, I live, like, my day life, I'm still struggling because I think that me coming out with my story is actually stopping from getting a regular job, because people Google me and like, we don't want to hire that guy. But I'm also spending my days talking to you. And so it's changed my life. But I've adapted that concept of keep on walking to now, the only thing constant in life is change. The only thing absolute certain is that tomorrow is going to be different than today. It might be worse, it might be better, but it's going to be different. And we need to just keep on walking, one step at a time. Left foot in front of right foot, then left foot again. Just keep on walking and you'll go. You walk one step today, okay. You walk one more step tomorrow, okay. Maybe the next day you try really hard, you walk 2 steps. Then you look back and you've walked 4 steps. We are moving even when it doesn't feel like it. So on the solutions of these problems of if it's gun control or if it's the mental health, we have to start walking. We have to go small and do something and then maybe see where it might lead us. So I have to say that it's both. We have one down here.
So,
where are you at? I can't see you.
So, if you could say something to your mother and your stepdad and your brother and your grandma, you said, without them saying anything back or anything disgusting or giving you any mean looks, what would you say to them?
Well, see, on that front, I actually already did. Because in part of my recovery, I spent 15 years, I never went to therapy, okay? I did it all myself, because therapists, after my experience with social services, I lost all faith in them helping me. So I went through it myself. And what I did was, the biggest thing that helped me was that I went through a process of acceptance, where I went to the people and the things that hurt me and that I feel did the most damage to acknowledge that it happened. Like I would go to my mom and I told her, I know this is what really happened. And not to accuse, not that you did this and now you need to pay. Just that this is what happened, this is the truth of the reality, it has changed our relationship forever, and this is going to be what the reality is from here on out. And having that acknowledgement, it helped a lot, because I'm really a strong proponent of the best vaccine to fear and pain is knowledge. The more you know about something, the less it's going to hurt you. The more you know about something, the less it's going to make you afraid. You might be scared of that horror movie the first time you see it. But when they show you how that monster got made and how they made that fake blood and how they built that costume, you're not going to be afraid of that monster anymore. So when I went through my own demons, I had to examine each one of them and fully do a accounting of it, and had to be honest with it, that I did terrible stuff too. Like, I'm not innocent in this. I'm not blaming. The shit that I went through is terrible and it put me in a bad position. But I was responsible for my decisions, both getting in and getting out of that decision. We have to start taking responsibility for our own personal decisions and actions and realize that we have much more agency over ourselves than we think we do. We have two down in the front.
So I heard you bring up CBT, which is cognitive behavioral therapy, and I heard that you're doing this all without any type of external help or external sources, i.e. a therapist or anything like that. What's the one thing you would look at that kept bringing you to that motto, that kept making you want to improve yourself, or how did that start?
That was actually Mike's example, because Mike had the polar opposite life that I had. I met him when I was 12 years old. He was 10. And we met over comic books. We both loved comic books. We met at a comic book shop. And come to find out, we actually lived on opposite ends of the same block at that time. So his family was successful. They were moderately wealthy, like upper middle class. And he went to college. He went on foreign trips. Got all of everything he wanted. And he had the stable, loving relationships with his world that I wanted to have. And with him being the person who never once looked at me like I was damaged or broken, when I so much respected him and his whole world, like I looked up to that, even though I was the older friend, I looked up to him and his whole life in ways that he had no clue about. Because he would tell me later on that he looked up to me because I was the smarter one and what yada yada, like I was the older friend, so he looked up to me because of that. But I never saw it that way from my perspective. I always looked up to him because he was the stable, happy one. And so growing up, he constantly would try, after that time with Amber, over the many years, he would try over and over again to try to like extricate me from that whole thing. Like the way I finally got out of that hooks of my family was that Mike went to go and had college. He went to art college in Kansas City. He went to Kansas City Art Institute. And for a year, he just moved me out there. He's like, you're coming to live with me. So I went and spent a year in Kansas City, which completely separated me from that whole social circle and completely got me out of that influence. And I spent a whole year being on my own away from that. And both the fact that I was able to then prove to myself I could do it and their anger that I left them and was able to do it on my own meant that when I came back, that whole thing had shifted. And so I wasn't stuck in that hell anymore. But it's still a process. Like I have twin sisters who are 10 years younger than I am. And I very rarely ever even mention them because they got it worse than I did. And they still are damaged by it. And I still, to this day, hold, like someone asked me the other day a really hard question. Do I forgive them? I don't know how to answer that one because forgiveness, in my opinion, would mean that they did it, I'm okay with it, that it's fine, that it's all right now, and it's not. And it won't ever be. But I've accepted it, and it doesn't hold any power over me. Like, I'm not mad about it. I don't harbor any anger over the situation because I've moved through it. I don't believe you can move past or over anything. You can't get over things, but you can go through everything because the only way out is through. So I'm not sure what I'd tell them besides showing them all of the good that I'm doing now and showing them that maybe if they spoke up more about and owned their own past, maybe they could help with this positive thing too, instead of fighting against it. Because the past is still weighing them down. The past, I look at it like luggage. Like you carry in suitcases, okay? They're packed with everything you've ever done. And you can walk around and carry them with you and drag them when they're dragging on the ground and you're sweating and your heart's beating hard and you feel like crap pulling them and you just gotta keep on dragging them. Every now and then they pop open and spill your shit everywhere and you just gotta keep on pulling them. You can do that and eventually get worn down by carrying them. Or you can set those bags down and keep on walking. The bags are still there. You can turn around and go through them anytime you want to. You wanna go pull out a shirt, you go pull out a shirt. But you don't have to carry it with you all day long. You don't have to be your past. You are your present, and that should be enough. After that one, can we come to the front? We got like 4 that are waiting. I see you guys down here.
So I was wondering if you still talk to Mike to this day, and what do you talk about?
Absolutely. I'm gonna get water over here. He's uncle to my kids. He is still my best friend. Sorry, water bottle. So my other transformation I did this whole year, 2 years ago I weighed almost 500 pounds. I was 468 pounds in November of 2016. And so I went through a weight loss process, and then I had gastric surgery and lost another 120 pounds. So I'm now about 270. Thank you very much. And I only say that to say that as my best friend, while I was that heavy, Mike would always say, because we used to go to concerts a lot when I was growing up. We'd go to Red Rocks and Fillmore and go to metal shows all the time. And when I was that heavy, he would tell me, dude, when you lose all that weight, I'm gonna reward you, we're going to Red Rocks. And I'm like, all right, fine, dude, whatever. And so I lost all the weight. And he surprised me with, 3 months ago, I went and saw 9 Inch Nails 2 nights in a row at Red Rocks. So because of him, he spent like almost $1,000 on my tickets. So yeah, both the achievement of being able to finally walk up there and do it, and that my best friend was hooked me up with it. So yeah, dude's still, he's the only person in the world that if he yelled at my wife and called her a name, I'd have to be like, well, baby, why do you make him yell at you? Questions up front? Who wants it?
Oh. What advice would you give to someone who went through what you went through, or who is going through what you went through but doesn't have a friend like Mike?
Just keep going and don't give up. You're not alone. There are people out there who will listen if you talk, and if you keep talking, someone will listen. Just do not give up. Keep going. The thing that will stop you is yourself.
Have you ever caught yourself being your old self? And if you have, like, how have you stopped it? Because it's hard to get away from old habits.
Over the years, yeah, I did. Yeah, it wasn't like some smooth ramp up, you know. At the point I am now, no, that's alien to me at this point, but that was 25 years ago. But yeah, I spent a good 5 years being like a weird phenomenon that also happened on that point before I finished that sentence is that I gathered a lot of followers because it wasn't, I never said I had a lot of friends back then, but I had a lot of disaster groupies who wanted to see the car crash and wanted to watch the flame out. And I was something that no one ever seen before because no one around me had anything like what I was going through in their world. So they all were like living vicariously through my hell. And so I always had that, but it was never really solid. So I kind of lost track of that answer. What was your question again?
Like, if you've gone back to old habits like in the past.
That's why I went there. Okay. If I ever, sorry, my brain bounces sometimes. If I ever went back to that spot. And yeah, for, I'd say a good 5-6 years, I was like the evil mastermind that was the one who knew how to, because my parents were professional liars, so I learned how to lie really well. And I learned how to manipulate people really well. And I learned how to survive by that. So I thought that was who I was. So when I was still wearing that like my persona, then I tried to make it the best persona of me I could be. But now looking at that, looking at who I was and looking back on it now, it was childish, thin, and immaterial. Like it was making myself aggressive just because I could make myself aggressive. And that's it. Chaos is not self-sustaining.
Okay, so I know how you said, like, if something's holding you back, just move on. Mm-hmm. But let's say your mom, like, wanted forgiveness and she stopped doing drugs. Like, would you want a relationship with her or no? Yes, yes. If there were some time that she would do anything to try to resolve any of that, yeah. The problem I have is that it's ongoing, that it's not stopped at all, and that hell in that family is still completely full swing. So if there was at any time any chance of them stopping that and possibly like maturing and being reasonable, rational adults, then yeah, I'd be completely open to it. In fact, I found out, 5 months ago that my mom had lung cancer, and so I reached out to her.
and was like, you know, I still love you. I know you have cancer, and I got no response. So I try, but at this point, I can't, the good that I'm doing so far outweighs the negative that they produce that I have to ignore it.
Okay. Hi, it's me. Hi. So everything that you went through was kind of like rough and really terrible, but like it created the great man that you are today. Would you go back and change it if you could?
No. And you know why? Because one of the first messages I got after I came out with my story was a lady telling me that I'm not going to tell you why, but I'm alive today because of what you said. And so within the first week of my story coming out, I got responses. First, I got a response from a guy whose niece was in the room at Parkland who lost a friend who got shot and killed. She saw my story. It gave her the first smile since the tragedy, so she asked me to keep going. This was literally the first week after the attack. And then the next day, I got a similar message from the Vegas survivors community after the Vegas massacre. Then the very next day, I got a similar message from the Newtown survivors, from the elementary school kids who lost their lives. And everything that I went through, if I can give any of those people even a second of hope and help, everything I went through is worth it, even the worst of it. If I can help one kid see that there's a way out of that darkness and that you are not alone and there's a way you can just keep on moving and move forward, you can make it through all of that. If I can help even one kid do that, then I'm gonna keep going no matter what. It's worth it. Oh, by the way, now that I'm going to do that, shameless plug time. If you guys are on Facebook, I have a group called You Are Not Alone. If you want links, send it to Katie or ask Katie or Dathan, they can hook you up. There's my daughter and my son, by the way. Katie and Dathan are my kids. So You Are Not Alone is a group all based on positivity and support. It is worldwide. It's people literally all over the globe, and it's all about this kind of thing, of people who have problems being able to share it in a place with no trolling, no insults, just being able to get support and compassion. So far, it stopped 6 suicides, 3 attacks, and we just helped a girl get out of white nationalism who was in the Charlottesville riots. So. And check it. Dathan has the logo. He's wearing my merch there also. We have T-shirts and stuff too. That was a group thing. Like, I'm not trying to sell that. That's just that my group decided we want a merch line, so they donated a design and everything. So he's wearing the hoodie. All right, questions?
Yeah. So earlier we were saying how when you were planning the shooting, it wasn't to get back at the people, but more to get back at your family. But if you were saying that your family didn't really care about you, how did you think that was going to get back at them? Like, did you not think about the people you were going to hurt and their families and all that? Like, was it going to be worth it?
I didn't think at all about the people I was going to hurt. It was completely selfish. It had nothing to do with the people I was going to hurt. In fact, I was oblivious to them as being people. I felt inhuman, and I felt like I had to scream out, and I felt like I hadn't been hurt at all, and someone needed to hear me, and this is the most damage I could do in the shortest amount of time. But it was absolutely 100% selfish, and I did not think at all about the people I was going to hurt. I wanted to make my parents pay by surviving and purposefully not going after them physically so that they could then deal with the ramifications of making a monster. Like, I wanted to do the most damage I can and then make them deal with having made me. So, yeah, it was, I'm not at all proud of who I was, but no real but to that. I'm not at all proud of who I was. So.
So when you were talking about when you had went to get help from a mental facility, from what you have described, do you believe that mental health treatment has improved?
Yes, it has. It has improved, and the access to it has improved. And I think that the awareness has improved. I think that one of the biggest steps that we need to try to accomplish is making the administrators see the effect they have on this whole phenomenon. So I think I mentioned earlier, when you're bullied, 5 might bully you, 5 might not, but then the teacher picks you out and everybody will pick on you. And so if the administrators see just how much much impact they have on either side, I think that that's where the stopgap happens. Because I think that the helpers in the mental health industry, they want to help. And I think the students, they want to get the help. But then there's the mediators in the middle that when they try to reach up to get the help, there's so much red tape and so much liability and so much different people that might get insulted or offended or lawsuits or whatever. Like, the only way I was able to do this because I was able to get a couple teachers to cheerlead me, because I was trying for months to come up and speak to you guys. And I hit that wall of static of administration that stops this kind of stuff from actually happening. And so on the mental health side, that needs to definitely be lessened. There needs to be an easier access from the students to the mental health providers. And I think that another key step is we need to somehow make it to where kids can have kids. I don't mean to say kids in a disrespectful way. You guys are students, you're not kids, you're young adults. I hate when people call you kids. But when you guys can have someone who you can talk to that isn't going to judge you and isn't going to try to make you their project and isn't going to turn you into a number in their machine. Because trying to get help and then having someone then turn you into, well, okay, now I'm going to fill my quota with you, completely shuts off not only that help, but any other help you're going to get, because you're going to look at them like I looked at social services for the next 20 years, that none of it's actually going to work. So we need to start fundamentally with making it more acceptable for people to get it and remove the stigma for people to talk about it. Like, there's a huge stigma around of, especially men, but women too, of discussing these things in public. Like, I'm a guy crying on stage. People, when I mentioned that I was going to be talking to a high school and I might cry on stage, the response was, oh, everybody's going to troll you. No one's going to listen to you. No one's going to care. Kids these days don't even listen. They're just going to make fun of you. I don't see anybody making fun of me. I don't see any trolling at all. So I think that there's a perception there that needs to be changed.
What would you say to a student who feels like they're in a constant hellhole?
That there's light eventually, that if you keep on going, it will change, that it might not look like it's going to get better now, but it will eventually change. I can't say it's going to get better. I can't say it's going to that it's going to fix itself. I can't say everything's going to be okay. But I can say that tomorrow the sun's going to rise, and that you have the decision to either fight against the changes. There's a phrase from a song that I like. It's from a band called Pussifer, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but it's, there are no demons save for those who refuse to accept the devastation left in the wake of change. So when you face the changes when you face this hell that you're living in, you can either fight against the changes that are coming at you and try to stay who you are, try to stay firm, and let it wear you down like water on a riverbed and beat you down and grind you down into dust. Or you can change and adapt with those changes and move with it and try to become like the water itself. So when you're faced with a seemingly black slate and you think that there's no way out, just keep walking, because eventually you're going to hit something. And when you hit that first thing, you can reach around to touch your second thing. And then eventually you might see light. And then you just keep going to that. But if you stop in that darkness, you're not going to go anywhere except for down even further. So I mentioned earlier there was a song, or an album, Downward Spiral. There's a flip side to that I like now that I bring up. There's a song by a band named Tool, and it's called Lateralis. And the song talks about spiraling out, that we have to ride the spiral of our divinity and discover that we are indeed still, can be divine and still human, and ride the spiral of experience, spiral out and keep going. And to me, it was really powerful to realize that when you go down that spiral, and people talk about depression like a spiral, and you're going down in the spiral. And to me, that has a lot of weight, because having gone through it, there are levels to it, okay? Where you start off with like this kind of sense of aggravation and self-loathing, and then that kind of congeals to like an anger of everyone else, where you start to kind of get aggressive to those around you. And then if that's not fixed, that can metastasize into like a destruction, where you start to destroy the people around you, start to insult and attack, and start to go after them aggressively. Then if that's not solved, that can metastasize even further to kind of deep destruction, where you're actively trying to hurt people around you. Like, you're not only just insulting them, you're actively trying to injure them. Okay? But then at the bottom of that, there's that space that I hit at the end of it, which was that, I call it annihilation, was that dark, calm spot. Okay? But the way out is through. So when you keep going, and you keep going down it, the spiral doesn't end in that dark spot. The spiral is going to keep going. But you can spiral back out. You don't have to keep going down. The spiral can move forward again. You can start to see colors, you can start to see feelings, you can start to see more people around you. If you just keep going, the spiral goes too. So just keep going. How are we on time? All right. Got time for like 2 more questions.
Just like you said people were gonna troll you for crying on stage, like, because we're right here. Because we're a bunch of teens, like, that's true. Like, how do you as a man, like, seek help? Because I know, like, I speak for a lot of us, like, when we try to, like, especially after something that doesn't seem that deep to anyone else, you get like, oh, stop being a bitch, like, it's not that deep, stop crying, you're not supposed to cry. Because a lot of people were raised in homes where crying was weak, so you were taught not to cry, so therefore you, like, end up turning to something worse because you bottle everything up.
Well, in my opinion, all of that don't cry, act like a man, that's all insecurity. That's all trying to live up to a standard of someone else because you're not confident in yourself. A real confident man was free crying, free wearing pink, free acting, free dancing around to girly songs. I love the new Kesha album, by the way. A real man is able to confidently own his own feelings and own his own emotions, regardless of what his boys might think or what the guys might think or what his buddies might say about it. Because his buddies are only saying that because they think they're gonna not look cool if they don't do it. And if everybody's only doing things because people might think it looks cool, then maybe the person who actually is doing their own thing is the real cool. Maybe you should just do your own thing, be yourself. Don't conform to the opinions of everybody else around you just because you need to act like a man. I actually think that right there is the toxic masculinity people always whine about. It's not the, well, we need to do things for men. It's the act like a man, stand up and be a man and stiff upper lip. Screw that. That's all a bunch of bunk. Because those men are the most insecure men ever when they actually talk about this shit right here. If you actually touch these kind of topics, those men crumble. Because no one ever talks about it with them. You know how many muscle-bound, strong men I've had crying in my arms talking about this stuff? Because no one ever mentions it, no one ever talks about it. And then when you give them the permission to actually talk about it, when you give them the ability to say, you can talk to this about me and I'm not gonna judge you about it, man. It's not gonna be a negative. No one's gonna make fun of you because you're hugging me and crying about it. When you give them that permission, they jump into it headlong. People run into that stuff because no one ever gives them that chance. No one ever gives them a place to where they can actually be vulnerable and drop that fake macho bullshit and just be a real guy, you know? A real guy who loves stupid things and loves dancing with his girl or loves sitting there watching a cartoon, loves reading a comic book, loves doing whatever you actually like doing, not just what someone else told you should do because that's what guys like. I think we got time for 2 more if we make them quick.
Hi. Why do you think Mike cared so much? Because I think it's really rare to find a friend that cares that much about you.
I didn't understand that.
Why do you think Mike cared so much about you? I think it's really rare to find a friend that cares that much about you.
I have no idea. I have no idea in the world. When we went and asked him, because for an interview, we went and filmed and they asked him why he did it, he thinks it's completely normal. His response is, well, that's what every friend should do. That's what a friend should treat a friend like. And for me, it changed my life completely. I to this day, will bow to that man and tell him that I owe him my life. To him, it was a frickin' Tuesday. Like, literally. Like, it didn't even register to him. Because that's just what he thinks he should do. So. I got time for 1 more.
When you met your wife, were you at your lowest point, or did you get past your depression phase when you met your wife?
I'm sorry, can you say that?
When you met your wife, were you over your depression phase, or?
I was right at the beginning of fixing the last stage of that. I didn't fully come out of that darkness until I had my first daughter. So, Dave and Katie are technically my stepkids. They're Becky's from her ex My 12-year-old is mine from my ex. Isabella's is ours together. In my family, there is no step. Those are my kids. I don't look at it at all separate at all. But technically, that's how the chronology of it worked. And so when I had my 12-year-old, I finally had something to live for and had something that mattered so much to me that I would die for it, like outside of myself. And so that was the final click that made me, because I had been kind of fixing myself before that, but I thought I was damaged. I thought I would never be able to be accepted. I thought if anybody found out this stuff about me, I'd be the villain, it'd be terrible, people would hate me forever. And so I always thought it was the negative part of my life. But I was starting to try to kind of fix myself emotionally and leave all that dark shit behind. And then when I had Natasha, that finally was like the push that made me fully start to fix all of that. And then, yeah, I met Becky 10 years ago, and that was 12 years ago I had Natasha. So that was right at the beginning of that, and then, yeah, she has changed my world completely over that course of time. All right, we got one last thing.
Hi, guys. I'm Becky. I'm his wife. It's nice to meet all of you. He is absolutely 100% here for you. He's not here to make anything about himself. It's for you. What matters, you are our future, and you are what is going to make this stop.
Yep,
and he is here for you. So if you need to talk, if you feel like this is not the place you want to talk, reach out to him. He is up night after night, morning after morning, talking to people around the world with problems that even myself, I'm like, whoa.
Yeah,
but he talks to them. He lets them know they're not alone. So if you feel that you don't want to talk now, that's fine. But understand if you want to, he's here for you.
Thank you, baby.
You're welcome.
The most beautiful woman in the world, everybody.
And last but not least, I love him more than anything in this world, and I think he's an outstanding man. And when I met him 10 years ago, the first words he said to me, the first words he said to me 10 years ago was, I think you're absolutely wonderful. Here's everything about me. He didn't hesitate. He put every card on the table, and he told me he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. And that's how our life is. I love you.
Thank you, baby. Okay, everybody, I think we got to wrap up. That's about time. So I really appreciate everybody for giving me this opportunity to speak. Thank you all so much. If anybody has any time in their passing period, I'll be hanging out here if you want to come up and talk to me at all.
So ladies and gents, you got about 10 minutes left of fifth period.